Welcome to today's Crosspoint Devotion. School has started again, and that means a lot of our students are taking a class called Math. I'm not sure if you were good at math or not. I was okay at math until I got into the higher levels like trigonometry and calculus, and then things got hard. But I kind of want to go back to the lower level of math and talk about something that I learned maybe in the 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. And that was, we learned these little signs called greater than, less than, and equal to. And if you remember, the greater than sign always had a big mouth, and that big mouth faced the side where the greater number would be. So if this side were 10 and this side were 8, the big mouth would be chomping at the bigger number, and that was how we learned greater than. And then the less than was always the opposite way. It would kind of be pointed at the lower number. And so those are the things that we learned, that if they were equal, 3 and 3, you'd put the equal sign between them. And so we learned as a child in math class, greater than, less than, and equal to. Well, today there's some math that we find in 2 Chronicles chapter 32. And it's a math that's kind of different from what we learned as children. Because in our childhood, if we said 1 million on one side and we had 1 on the other side, we would have that greater than sign doing this. 1 million and 1. The greater than sign would be facing this way because the big mouth would be facing that 1 million number, and then the smaller point would be facing the number 1. But in God's economy of math, we learned that 1 is greater than 1 million. It's kind of odd, isn't it? Well, here's what's happening in 2 Chronicles chapter 32. King Hezekiah has been a good king. He's been trying to follow the Lord with all of his heart. And yet there's this enemy called Assyria in chapter 32 verse 1 that has decided to come and make an attack on Jerusalem, which is King Hezekiah's throne area. When that Assyrian army begins to collect right outside of Jerusalem, as the people continue to look day after day at the amassing army, they can see the Assyrians are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The army's just growing in number by day. And the people inside the city walls begin to get nervous, and they approach Hezekiah and ask, what are we going to do? Well, Hezekiah makes some practical decisions to try to help the people in the city. One of the things he does is he stopped up the water springs. Those springs were inside the city wall, and they were allowing fresh water to flow out under the wall, out to the troops that were gathering out there that were going to be the attackers. So Hezekiah stopped up those fresh water springs so that the fresh water wouldn't leave the walled city of Jerusalem. And so he did some practical things like that. But then Hezekiah makes a statement that lets us see God's math. That when you've got God, one single God, the one and only God, when you've got Him on your side, that is more than enough to defeat the army that's gathering outside the wall. The math doesn't make sense, at least according to our estimation, the way we were taught when we were children. Because if we were doing it in our math, the big mouth of the greater than sign would be facing the army that was gathering from Assyria, and the point would be toward the 1. But in God's math, it's the reverse. When you've got God, you've got more than enough to win the victory. And that's what Hezekiah told the people. Here's what it says in 2 Chronicles 32 verse 7 and 8. Be strong and courageous. I think those are the same words we've heard from Moses and we've heard from Joshua that God has given to them. Now Hezekiah is sharing those with his people. Be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid or discouraged before the king of Assyria or before the large army that is with him, for there are more with us than with him. And then here it comes. He has only human strength, but we have the Lord our God to help us and to fight our battles. So the people relied on the words of the king of Judah, and his name was Hezekiah. Hezekiah reminded the people, when you've got God, you've got more than enough. Now, the reason I want to tell you this quick story and these few verses is that there are some of you watching this video and you're going through some pretty severe crises. You're struggling through some things that seem overwhelming. It looks like the odds are not in your favor. You feel like you're on the short end of the stick, and I just want to tell you today, if you know the Lord God, because you've got a relationship with Him through Jesus Christ, His Son, you've got all the resources you need to have victory. Now, how is God going to work that out? Does that mean He's just going to run away the enemy, run away the problem, or take away the issue? Not necessarily, but you just know walking through that valley that you're going through, God's with you. And His strength is more than sufficient. And His grace is going to overflow into your life like you could not believe. Because when you've got God, you've got all that you need. So I hope that'll encourage you as you're facing some dark and difficult days, some discouraging days. Trust God. Because if He's with you, that's all you really need. And that will lead you to victory. Well, I hope that'll encourage you today, and we hope you'll come back and join us for the next Crosspoint Devotion.